I thought I'd witnessed every kind of HOA madness before, but Karen Whitmore quickly proved me wrong. As the self-declared president of the Sunset Ridge Homeowners Association, she had transformed what should have been community management into her personal fiefdom. What began as a simple disagreement over landscaping spiraled into her demanding that I cover her personal electric bill and even calling 911 when I refused. It all started 3 months ago when I moved into what I assumed would be a calm suburban neighborhood. The houses were beautiful, the sidewalks spotless, and the HOA dues seemed reasonable enough. What I didn't realize was that Karen had been running the association unchecked for 5 years, with the other board members long since abandoning any attempt to oppose her. She had been left to reign supreme, and she reveled in it. The first red flag came almost immediately. While I was still settling in, Karen appeared at my doorstep carrying a massive 3-inch binder. Inside were rules I had never seen in the official HOA documents. She stood there in her crisp khakis and perfectly tucked polo shirt, clutching her clipboard like a general preparing for inspection. Now, as you can see in Section 12.4, she said, flipping pages with mechanical precision, lawn care must be performed every Saturday between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. No exceptions. I personally inspect each property on Sunday mornings to verify compliance. I frowned. The original HOA covenants only stated that yards should be maintained regularly, nothing about exact days or time slots. Karen's pleasant smile stiffened into something sharper. Well, I've updated those outdated guidelines. These new standards protect our property values. That should have been my cue to start documenting everything, but I brushed it off, assuming I could handle one power-hungry neighbor. I couldn't have been more wrong. The real battle began when I hired a landscaping crew to install native plants in my yard. I had done my homework, secured permits from the city, cross-checked the HOA's official covenants, and confirmed that drought-resistant plants were allowed. The result was a vibrant garden of California poppies and lavender bushes, sustainable and fully compliant. Karen showed up the very next morning, red-faced and bristling with outrage. "What do you think you're doing?" she barked, stabbing her finger toward the garden. "Those plants are not on the approved list." I calmly stepped outside with the HOA documents in hand. According to the covenants, homeowners may plant any native drought-resistant species. These meet all the criteria. Her eyes flashed as she whipped out her ever-present clipboard. Those covenants are outdated. I've written updated landscaping rules that require prior approval. You'll need to rip these out and replace them with approved grass. "Show me where these rules were officially adopted by the board," I replied. Karen narrowed her eyes. "I am the board. I make the rules, and I'm telling you those plants have to go." In that moment, I understood exactly what I was up against. Someone who believed her title gave her absolute authority, even above the law. Over the following weeks, things spiraled fast. Karen began plastering violation notices on my door daily, each more ridiculous than the last. She fined me for leaving my trash, cans out too long, for parking in my own driveway during restricted hours, and even for curtains she claimed were the wrong shade of white. None of these fines had any basis in the HOA documents, but that didn't slow her down. When I ignored her made-up penalties, she doubled down. She started lurking around my property, snapping photos from every angle and leaving long, condescending notes about my failure to meet community standards. The final straw came when I opened my mailbox to find a bill. Not an HOA fee, but Karen's personal electric statement. The amount was $4,376.22. Attached was a sticky note that read, "Your non-compliance has forced me to spend extra hours managing your violations. You owe me for the additional electricity used in my home office." I laughed out loud. The audacity was almost artful. She had actually convinced herself that her obsessive harassment was somehow my fault, and that I should foot the bill for it. That afternoon, I walked over to her house, electric bill in hand. She opened the door wearing rubber gloves, clutching a spray bottle mid-cleaning spree. "I think you accidentally dropped this in my mailbox," I said evenly, holding up the statement. Her face lit up with smug satisfaction. "Oh no, that's correct," Karen replied with unshakable confidence. her eyes glinting with self-righteous conviction. As I explained in my note, your constant violations have created additional work for me. I've had to spend countless hours documenting your infractions, researching penalty structures, and contacting various city departments about your non-compliance. My electricity usage has increased significantly because of the time I've been forced to spend in my home office. I stared at her in disbelief, struggling to wrap my mind around the mental gymnastics required to come to that conclusion. Karen, you cannot charge homeowners for your personal utility bills. That's not how an HOA works. She waved off my protest, flipping to another page on her clipboard as though she were reading from a script. According to my calculations, you owe me for 3 months of increased electricity usage, plus a processing fee for the additional administrative burden. Payment is due within 10 business days, or I'll be forced to take legal action. I took a deep breath. I'm not paying your electric bill, I said firmly. This is harassment, and you need to stop. Karen's smug expression collapsed into icy fury. We'll see about that, she snapped before slamming the door in my face. I should have known she wouldn't let it go, but I still underestimated just how far she was willing to push her imaginary authority. 2 days later, I was working from home when the sound of sirens echoed down the street. My stomach tightened as a police cruiser pulled to a stop directly in front of my house. 2 officers stepped out and started up my walkway. Across the street, Karen practically burst out of her front door, bouncing with excitement as she hurried to join them, her face lit with triumphant satisfaction. I opened my door before they could knock. Good afternoon, officers. Is there a problem? The older officer, a composed man in his 50s, glanced at his notepad. We received a report regarding theft of services and refusal to pay legally mandated fees. The caller claims you owe money to the homeowners association and are refusing to pay. I looked past him at Karen, who was standing just behind the officers with her arms folded tightly across her chest, her smirk practically daring me to deny it. I'm current on all my HOA dues, I said calmly. In fact, my automatic payment went through last week. That's not what this is about, Karen interrupted quickly, stepping forward with her clipboard like it was a badge of authority. He owes me $437.62 for additional administrative costs related to his ongoing violations. When someone refuses to pay legally mandated fees, that's theft of services. The younger officer, looking puzzled, asked, Ma'am, are you saying he owes this money to the homeowners association? No, Karen said, puffing herself up. He owes it to me personally, or for the extra hours I've spent managing his case. I had to use additional electricity in my home office. The 2 officers exchanged a glance, and I could see the exact moment realization dawned on them. The older officer cleared his throat, his tone measured but firm. Ma'am, we can't arrest someone for refusing to pay your personal electric bill. That's a civil dispute between private parties, not a criminal matter. Karen's face flushed crimson. But he's stealing services. I provided administrative work, and he refuses to pay for it. The younger officer tilted his head. Did he request these services? Well, no, but did he sign any agreement to pay you? Not exactly, she admitted reluctantly. Then this is not a criminal matter, the older officer said, his patience thinning. If you believe someone owes you money, you can file a claim in small claims court. But we cannot enforce personal billing disputes. I could practically see Karen's fantasy unraveling in front of her eyes. She had been so convinced of her authority that she truly believed the police would march up and arrest me over her power bill. But I'm the HOA president, she protested desperately. I have the authority to assess fees and penalties. The older officer's jaw tightened. Ma'am, being HOA president doesn't give you the right to bill residents for your personal expenses. And if you continue to make false police reports, you could be charged with misuse of emergency services. With that, the officers turned and walked back to their car. Karen stayed rooted in my driveway, glaring at my house with a storm of rage and disbelief twisting across her face. She muttered furiously to herself before finally stomping back to her home. I hoped that would be the end of it. But humiliation only seemed to fuel Karen's obsession. Over the next week, she doubled down on her crusade against me. Violation notices began piling up faster than ever, sometimes 2 or 3 in a single day. The accusations grew even more absurd. Citations for aggressive landscaping, choices that intimidate neighbors, fines for non-approved outdoor furniture, and even a notice that my driveway's surface was reflecting sunlight in a disruptive and inconsiderate manner. It was clear Karen wasn't just enforcing rules anymore. She was inventing them out of thin air, determined to prove her power no matter how ridiculous she looked. The fines she concocted grew increasingly absurd. $500 for environmental non-compliance, $750 for architectural insubordination, and $1,000 for willful disregard of community harmony standards. When I continued to ignore her fabricated penalties, Karen escalated to what she probably saw as her ultimate move, calling 911 once more, this time insisting I was destroying property values through malicious non-compliance and demanding my immediate arrest for grand theft of neighborhood equity. The same two officers responded, and they were noticeably less patient this time. "Ma'am, this is the third time this month you've called about civil disputes with your neighbor," the older officer said sternly. Karen's indignation flared. "But he's causing thousands of dollars in damage to our property values." "That sounds like vandalism or destruction of property," the younger officer replied carefully. "Having plants you don't like is not vandalism, and property values are not something that can be stolen." That was the last straw. Karen had completely lost touch with reality, and her constant harassment was interfering with my ability to enjoy my own home. I had meticulously documented every violation notice, every fabricated fine, and every interaction we'd had. It was time to let her face real consequences. The following morning, I filed a formal complaint with the State Department of Real Estate, which oversees HOA operations. I also submitted a harassment complaint to the local police and sent a certified letter to every homeowner in the association, outlining Karen's unauthorized rule changes and attempts to collect personal payments from residents. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Many other homeowners admitted they'd quietly suffered under Karen's arbitrary rules and fines, but had been too intimidated to speak up. Once they realized they weren't alone, a revolt began. Within 2 weeks, enough homeowners had signed a petition, demanding an emergency board meeting and a vote of no confidence in Karen's leadership. The Department of Real Estate launched an investigation into her unauthorized rules and her attempts to collect personal fees. Meanwhile, the emergency board meeting took place on a Tuesday evening at the community center. Nearly every homeowner in the association attended. Karen arrived exuding confidence, clearly convinced she could talk her way out of trouble. "I don't understand why everyone is so upset," she began, standing at the front with her clipboard and binder in hand. "Everything I've done has been for the betterment of the community. These enhanced guidelines maintain our property values and uphold neighborhood standards." One by one, homeowners shared their stories. Mrs. Peterson from Oak Street had been fined $800 for insufficiently cheerful garden decorations. Mr. Rodriguez received violations for parking his work truck in his own driveway overnight. The Johnsons were cited simply for leaving their children's toys visible for more than 2 hours a day. With each account, Karen's face grew paler. She repeatedly interrupted to insist that her rules were necessary, but the more she defended herself, the more delusional she appeared. The final blow came when I stood and read aloud her outrageous electric bill demand, explaining how she had called 911 twice in an attempt to have me arrested for refusing to pay her personal utility costs. This, I explained, is what happens when someone loses sight of their actual authority. Karen had transformed HOA management into her personal power trip, and it was time for it to end. The vote was decisive. Karen was removed from the HOA board by a margin of 43-2, with only herself and her next-door neighbor, Mrs. Hartwell, voting in her favor, but the real consequences were just beginning. The Department of Real Estate's investigation found that Karen had violated multiple state regulations governing HOA operations. She had created unauthorized rules without proper board approval, attempted to collect personal fees, and misrepresented her authority to homeowners. The penalties were severe: a $15,000 fine for regulatory violations, plus an additional $5,000 for each homeowner who had paid her unauthorized fees. 7 families had actually paid some of her fabricated fines over the years. bringing the total to $50,000. She was also banned from serving on any HOA board in the state for 10 years and required to pay restitution to every affected homeowner. When the Department of Real Estate agent read the penalties aloud at the follow-up meeting, Karen's face went ghostly white. $50,000? She whispered, barely audible. I don't have that kind of money. I was just trying to help the community.